The city bus rumbled through the busy streets, its engine humming beneath the steady chatter of passengers. Inside, people crowded together, some lost in their phones, others gazing out the windows at the passing world. Among them sat a young black boy, no older than 12, his school backpack resting on his lap. His small fingers fidgeted with the straps, and he occasionally glanced up, watching people shuffle in and out at every stop. His feet barely touched the floor, swinging slightly as he tried to get comfortable in the cramped space. The bus came to a halt with a hiss, and the doors creaked open. A cool gust of air rushed in as a frail, elderly woman stepped on board. Her silver hair peeked out from under a knitted hat, and her wrinkled hands clutched a cane. She moved slowly, her frail body weighed down by the years. The bus jerked forward as she steadied herself, her eyes scanning the seats, hoping for an empty one, but the bus was packed, every seat occupied. She let out a tired sigh, gripping the nearest pole for support. Her knuckles turned white as she tightened her hold, struggling to balance herself against the swaying motion of the vehicle. Passengers barely glanced up, some too engrossed in their phones, others pretending not to notice. The boy, however, saw her. He watched as she struggled, her arms trembling slightly. Something inside him stirred, a sense of responsibility, a feeling he couldn't ignore. Without hesitation, the boy shifted in his seat, glancing around quickly to see if anyone else would act. No one did. Some passengers avoided eye contact, while others stared blankly out the window. He looked back at the elderly woman, noticing how her legs wobbled slightly as the bus jolted forward. She gripped the metal pole tighter, her fingers trembling. That was all he needed to see. He scooted to the edge of his seat and stood up, clearing his throat slightly to get her attention. "Ma'am, you can take my seat," he said, his voice polite but firm. His words cut through the low murmur of conversations around them. A few nearby passengers glanced in their direction, some looking surprised, others indifferent. The elderly woman turned her head slowly, her tired eyes meeting his. For a moment she seemed unsure, as if she didn't expect anyone to offer. Then her lips curled into a small, grateful smile. "Oh, sweetheart, are you sure?" she asked, her voice warm but fragile, like a whisper carried by the wind. "Yes, ma'am," he nodded, stepping aside and gesturing toward the seat. "Please." With a soft chuckle, she carefully lowered herself onto the seat, sighing as she settled in. "You are such a kind young man," she murmured, placing her cane beside her. "Not many do things like this anymore." The boy simply shrugged, a little embarrassed by the attention. "It's the right thing to do," he said quietly, gripping a pole to steady himself as the bus continued on its way. The bus rumbled along, weaving through the city streets as passengers came and went. The elderly woman sat comfortably now, her breathing steadier, though her eyes held a thoughtful look. She glanced at the boy standing nearby, gripping the pole to keep his balance. His backpack was slung over one shoulder now, his other hand resting casually at his side. He seemed unaware of the impact his simple act of kindness had made. She watched him for a while, a small smile tugging at her lips. There was something about him, his quiet politeness, the way he acted without hesitation, the way he didn't expect anything in return. In a world where people often rushed past each other, absorbed in their own lives, this boy had stopped, noticed her struggle, and done something about it. Reaching into her coat pocket, she pulled out a small, slightly crumpled piece of paper. Her fingers trembled slightly as she fished out a pen. For a moment she hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. Then, with slow, deliberate strokes, she began to write. Her handwriting was elegant but slightly shaky, shaped by years of experience and age. As she finished, she folded the note and turned toward the boy. He was still standing, looking out the window, lost in thought. Gently, she reached out and touched his hand, the warmth of her fingers surprising him. He looked down, meeting her gaze. "Here, sweetheart," she said softly, pressing the folded paper into his palm. "Take this." The boy blinked in surprise, his fingers instinctively closing around the note. "What is it?" he asked, his voice curious but hesitant. "Just a little something," she replied with a knowing smile. "Open it when you have a moment." He nodded slowly, unsure of what to expect, but sensing the importance of the gesture. He tucked the note into his pocket, feeling its weight against his fingertips, and waited for his stop, wondering what the woman had written. As the bus neared his stop, the boy's fingers brushed against the folded note in his pocket. Curiosity stirred inside him. He had never been given something like this before, a handwritten note from a stranger. The elderly woman sat quietly, her eyes focused on the world outside the window, as if lost in thought. The boy hesitated for a moment, then carefully unfolded the paper, his eyes scanning the slightly shaky handwriting. "Your kindness reminds me of my late grandson. He was just like you, thoughtful, selfless, always looking out for others. I lost him a few years ago, and there are days when I miss him more than words can express. Today, for the first time in a long time, I felt his presence again. You reminded me of the goodness that still exists in the world. Thank you for that. Never lose your kindness. It is a rare and precious gift." The boy's heart tightened as he reread the words. He hadn't expected anything like this. To him, giving up his seat had been such a small act, something that felt natural. But to her, it had meant so much more. He looked up at the woman who was now watching him with soft, knowing eyes. Their gazes met, and for a moment no words were needed. He nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had formed in just a few minutes. She smiled, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, an unspoken understanding. The bus slowed to a stop, and the doors hissed open. The boy slung his backpack over his shoulder, carefully tucking the note into his pocket as if it was something precious. Before stepping off, he turned back to the woman and gave her a small wave. "Thank you," he said softly. Her smile widened. "No, sweetheart, thank you." As the bus pulled away, the boy stood on the sidewalk, the paper still pressed against his fingers. He felt different, like he had been part of something bigger than just giving up a seat. He had made someone feel seen, remembered, and cared for. And that, he realized, was the true power of kindness.